The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, the Mahabharata, lecture delivered by Swami Vivekananda at the Shakespeare Hall, California in 1900, Part 4. The greatest incident of the war was the marvelous and immortal poem of the Gita, the song Celestial. It is the popular scripture of India and the loftiest of all teachings. It consists of a dialogue held by Arjun with Krishna just before the commencement of the fight on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. I would advise those of you who have not read the book to read it. If you only knew how much of it has influenced your own country, even. If you want to know the source of Emerson's inspiration, it is this book, the Gita. He went to see Carlyle, and Carlyle made him a present of the Gita. And that little book is responsible for the Concord movement. All the broad movements in America, in one way or another, are indebted to the Concord Party. The central figure of the Gita is Krishna. As you worship Jesus of Nazareth, as God came down as man, so also the Hindus worship many incarnations of God. They believe in not one or two only, but in many who have come down from time to time according to the needs of the world, for the preservation of dharma and the destruction of wickedness. Each sect has one, and Krishna is one of them. Krishna perhaps has a larger number of followers in India than any other incarnation of God. His followers hold that he was the most perfect of all those incarnations. Why? Because they say, look at Buddha and the other incarnations. They were only monks, and they had no sympathy for married people. How could they have had? But look at Krishna. He was great as a son, as a king, as a father, and all through his life he practiced the marvelous teachings which he preached. He who in the midst of the greatest of activity finds the sweetest of peace, and in the midst of the greatest calmness is the most active, he is known the secret of life. Krishna shows the way how to do this by being non-attached. Do everything, but do not get identified with anything. You are the soul, the pure, the free. All the time you are the witness. Our misery comes not from work, but by our getting attached to something. Take for instance money. Money is a great thing to have. Earn it, says Krishna. Struggle hard to get money, but don't get attached to it. So with children, with wife, husband, relatives, fame, everything you have, no need to shun them. Only don't get attached. There is only one attachment that belongs to the Lord and to none other. Work for them, love them, do good to them, sacrifice 100 lives if need be for them, but never get attached. His own life was the exact exemplification of that. Remember that the book which delineates the life of Krishna is several thousand years old, and some parts of his life are very similar to those of Jesus of Nazareth. Krishna was of royal birth. There was a tyrant king called Kans, and there was a prophecy that one would be born of such and such family who would be a king. So Kans ordered all the male children to be massacred. The father and the mother were cast by Kans in prison, where the child was born. A light shone in the prison, and the child spoke, saying, I am the light of the world, born for the good of the world. You find Krishna again symbolically represented with cows, the great cowherd as he is called. Sages affirmed that God himself was born, and they went to pay him homage. In other parts of the story, the similarity between the two does not continue. Sri Krishna conquered this tyrant Kans, but he never thought of accepting or occupying the throne himself. He had nothing to do with that. He had done the duty, and there it ended. After the conclusion of the Kurukshetra war, the great warrior and the very venerable grandsire Bhishma, who fought 10 days out of the 18 days battle, still lay on his deathbed and gave instructions to Yudhishthir on various subjects, such as the duties of the king, the duties of the four castes, the four stages of life, the laws of marriage, the bestowing of gifts, etc., basing them on the teachings of the ancient sages. He explained the Sankhya philosophy and Yoga philosophy and narrated numerous tales and traditions about saints and gods and kings. These teachings occupy nearly one-fourth of the entire work and form an invaluable storehouse of Hindu laws and moral codes. Yudhishthir had in the meantime been crowned king, but the awful bloodshed and extinction of superiors and relatives weighed heavily on his mind, and then, under the advice of Vyasa, he performed the Ashwamedh sacrifice. After the war, for 15 years, Dhritarashtra dwelt in peace and honor, obeyed by Yudhishthir and his brothers. Then the aged monarch, leaving Yudhishthir on the throne, retired to the forest with his devoted wife and Kunti, the mother of the Pandav brothers, to pass his last days in asceticism. 36 years had now passed since Yudhishthir reigned in his empire. Then came to him the news that Krishna had left his mortal body. Krishna, the sage, his friend, his prophet, his counselor, had departed. Arjuna hastened to Dwarka and came back only to confirm the sad news that Krishna and the Yadavas were all dead. Then the king and the other brothers, overcome with sorrow, declared that the time for them to go to had arrived. So they cast off the burden of royalty, placed Parikshit, the grandson of Arjuna, on the throne, and retired to the Himalayas on the great journey, the Mahaprasthana. This was a peculiar form of sannyas. It was a custom for old kings to become sannyasis. In ancient India, when the men became very old, they would give up everything. So did the kings. When a man did not want to live anymore, he went to the Himalayas without eating, drinking, and walked on and on till the body failed. All the time thinking of God, he just marched on till the body gave way. Then came the gods, the sages, and they told King Yudhishthir that he should go and reach heaven. To go to heaven, one has to cross the highest peaks of the Himalayas. Beyond the Himalayas is Mount Meru. On top of the Mount Meru is heaven. None ever went there in this body. There are the gods reside, and Yudhishthir was called upon by the gods to go there. So the 5 brothers and their wife clad themselves in the robes of bark and set out on their journey. On the way they were followed by a dog. On and on they went, and they turned their very feet northernwards, to where the Himalayas lifts its lofty peaks, and they saw the mighty Mount Meru in front of them. Silently they walked on in the snow until suddenly the queen fell, to rise no more. To Yudhishthir, who was leading the way, Bhima, one of the brothers, said, "Behold, O king, the queen has fallen." The king shed tears, but he did not look back. "We are going to meet Krishna," he says. "No time to look back, march on." After a while, again Bhima said, "Behold, our brother Sahadeva has fallen." The king shed tears, but paused. "March on," he cried. One after the other in the cold and snow, all 4 brothers dropped down, but unshaken, though alone, the king advanced onward. Looking behind, he saw the faithful dog was still following him. And so the king and the dog went on through snow and ice, over hill and dale, climbing higher and higher, till they reached Mount Meru. And there they began to hear the chimes of heaven. The celestial flowers were showered upon the virtuous king by the gods. Then descended the chariot of the gods, and Indra prayed to him. ascend on this chariot, greatest of mortals, thou that alone art given to enter heaven without changing the mortal body. But no, that Yudhishthir would not do so without his devoted brothers and his queen. Then Indra explained to him that the brothers had already gone thither before him. And Yudhishthir looked around and said to the dog, "Get into the chariot, child." The god stood aghast. "What? The dog?" he cried. "Do thou cast off this dog." "The dog goeth not to heaven." "Great king, what dost thou mean? Art thou mad? Thou, the most virtuous of the human race, thou only canst go to heaven in thy body. But he has been my devoted companion through snow and ice. When all my brothers were dead, my queen left. He alone never left me. How can I leave him now? There is no place in heaven for men with dogs. He has to be left behind. There is nothing unrighteousness in this. "I do not go to heaven," replied the king, "without a dog. I shall never give up such a one who has taken refuge with me until my own life is at an end. I shall never swerve from righteousness, nay, not even for the joys of heaven or the urging of a god." Then said Indra, "On one condition the dog goes to heaven. You have been the most virtuous of mortals, and he has been a dog, killing and eating animals. He is sinful, hunting and taking other lives. You can exchange heaven with him." "Agreed," says the king. "Let the dog go to heaven." At once the scene changed. Hearing these noble words of Yudhishthir, the dog revealed himself as Dharma. The dog was none other than Yama, the lord of death and justice. And Dharma exclaimed, "Behold, O king, no man was ever so unselfish as thou, willing to exchange heaven with a little dog for the sake of disclaiming all his virtues and ready to go even to hell for him. Thou art well born, O King of Kings. Thou hast compassion for all creatures, O Bharat, of which this is a bright example. Hence regions of undying felicity are thine. Thou hast won them, O King. And shine is a celestial and high goal." Then Yudhishthir with Indra, Dharma and other gods proceeded to heaven in a celestial car. He undergoes some trials, bathes in the celestial Ganga and assumes a celestial body. He meets his brothers who are now immortals, and all at last is bliss. Thus ends the story of the Mahabharata, setting forth in a sublime poem the triumph of virtue and defeat of vice. In speaking of the Mahabharata to you, it is simply impossible for me to present the unending array of the grand and majestic characters of the mighty heroes depicted by the genius and mastermind of Vyasa. The internal conflicts between righteousness and filial affection in the mind of the God-fearing yet feeble old blind king Dhritarashtra, the majestic character of the grandsire Bhishma, the noble and the virtuous nature of the royal Yudhishthir, and of the other four brothers, as mighty in valor as in devotion and loyalty, the peerless character of Krishna, unsurpassed in human wisdom, and not less brilliant, the characters of the women, the stately queen Gandhari, the loving mother Kunti, the ever devoted and all-suffering Draupadi. These and hundreds of other characters in this epic and those of the Ramayana have been the cherished heritage of the whole Hindu world for the last several thousands of years and form the basis of their thoughts and of their moral and ethical ideas. In fact, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are the two encyclopedias of the ancient Aryan life and wisdom, portraying an ideal civilization which humanity has yet to aspire after.